Hi, everybody. I'm Karen Hartglass. You are listening to It's All About Food. Big day today. We have plant-based community royalty with us. You all know the Campbell family, and today I will be talking with Kim and Nelson Campbell. Kim Campbell is the author of the PlantPure Nation and the PlantPure Kitchencookbooks. And today we'll be talking about her newest cookbook, PlantPure Comfort Food. Now in the new cookbook, we have comfort food recipes to satisfy a wide range of palates, making a healthy, plant-based lifestyle more accessible than ever. Kim is also the director of culinary education and development at PlantPure, where she develops new food products and delivers educational programming. Kim graduated from Cornell University with a BS in Human Service Studies and a concentration in nutrition and child development. She taught in elementary and middle school classrooms for over 10 years. Her passion has always been nutrition education for children, families, and adults. Kim has been a plant-based cook for more than 35 years, cooking for her family and friends. Her love of culinary arts goes back to her early childhood growing up in a large traditional family. Kim is gifted at creating traditional American cuisine using 100% accessible plant-based ingredients, and she builds flavors and textures that are familiar to most people, helping to make the transition to a plant-based diet easier for people. And now a bit about Nelson Campbell. On the heels of writing and directing the 2015 documentary film PlantPure Nation, Nelson Campbell founded PlantPure Communities in early 2016. Released in theaters in over 100 cities, the PlantPure Nation film, now on Amazon Prime, highlights the dramatic healing power of a plant-based diet and examines the political and economic factors that have suppressed information about these healing benefits while making connections to public policy, medical practice, food deserts, and farming. As the founder of PlantPure Communities, Nelson continues to drive the strategic direction of the organization. PlantPure Communities supports an international network of local support and advocacy groups called PODs, now involving more than 100,000 people, and is launching a grassroots and media-driven strategy to engage this network in bringing the plant-based nutrition message into local communities across the United States. This strategy will be kicked off in early 2023 with the release of a sequel to PlantPure Nation called From Food to Freedom, which Nelson wrote and directed. Nelson also founded the PlantPure Foods business. PlantPure sells plant-based foods through supermarkets and has made a philanthropic commitment to waive 100% of its profit margin on sales of certain of its products in under-resourced communities. In addition to his work with both PlantPure organizations, Nelson has extensive experience in public speaking, mostly focused on issues surrounding plant-based nutrition, but also touching on public policy, economics, and social concerns. Prior to his involvement with PlantPure Nation, Nelson worked for 25 years as a business entrepreneur. He graduated from Cornell University with a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in economics. We have a couple of big things to talk about. So first, we're going to talk about a documentary that is just coming out, From Food to Freedom. I'm just going to open it up for Nelson to talk about that.
Okay, well, thanks, Karen. It's nice to be here today with you. Yeah, this is our second film. The first film was PlantPure Nation, which came out in theaters in 2015. And this was a film project that actually started out pointed in a different direction. We thought that about a year ago, that a little over a year ago, that we were going to have an opportunity to work with a healthcare partner in New York to launch a major campaign there. And so we had a storyline for that all figured out, and they were going to help support it. And I won't go into the details, but we'll just say that there were internal politics on their side that kind of undermined, I guess, that opportunity. So in that initial storyline, we had a project that we were planning to do in Greensboro, a live-in immersion in Greensboro, North Carolina. And that was supposed to be a prelude, kind of the first chapter to this larger story, which subsequently didn't happen. But we filmed that project in Greensboro, and we figured out how to make that the movie. And it turned out, I think, really quite well. I'm really excited about the film. I don't want to give away all of the details because the film is not coming out till March. And eventually, we hope to get it on Amazon or Netflix. So it's widely available. But I'll just tell enough to kind of give you a sense of what it's about. So we recruited 6 people to participate in a 10-day live-in immersion. All 6 people had type 2 diabetes, and they were all taking insulin. So they came to this location in Greensboro for 10 days. We also, Kim there, and a chef friend of ours, Fernando Peralta, and the 2 of them prepared meals for these folks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 10 days. So they ate like royalty. The food was fantastic. We also had a friend of ours who's a physician, Dr. Lori Marbus, who's known by many people in the plant-based community, who came and lived in the house for 10 days. They all had Libre monitors so that Lori could monitor their glucose levels 24/7. And so we filmed the whole process, and we, during the course of the film, we hear their individual stories, and, even before they got there. And so we get to know them, and then we see how their bodies heal through this process. And it's really quite striking. This then creates the opportunity for us in the film to digress into larger topics. So we digress into the connection of nutrition to chronic disease, to immunity, and to the pandemic that we just lived through. And we also note the failure of many of the authorities to help communicate the connection between food and immunity and the worst outcomes from COVID. As we point out in the film, early in the pandemic, the Italian government, when they were experiencing that early surge, did a study, and they found that around 99% of the people who were dying had pre-existing conditions, mostly chronic conditions. And in this country here, it's a little vague and uncertain, but up to about 40% of the people who were dying in this country actually had diabetes, mostly type 2 diabetes. And yet this critical connection of food to immunity to the worst outcomes of COVID wasn't communicated well at all, actually, during the pandemic. So we discussed that. And we also, toward the latter part of the film, we catch up with the participants to see how they're doing 6 months later. So that's interesting, and it gives us an opportunity to make some other points. So that's essentially the outline of the story. And I'm just pretty excited about it. I think it's a good film.
It is a good film. I'm glad I watched it. And again, we don't want to give away much, but this issue of government power and the information that the government is going to give us and lead us with, unfortunately, it's a continuing story through the generations, because your father experienced so much pushback when he was giving excellent advice over the years to panels and trying to make change, and the lobbyists and the capitalists and the meat and sugar and dairy industries were all pushing back against very vital information that is so important to our nation and to the whole planet, as we know now, because we all know what animal agriculture is doing, not only to our personal health, but the health of the planet. So I don't know how it felt to you. I know you felt you had to do this film, but how frustrating. We went through this pandemic and we knew how we could have prevented it, or at least minimized it significantly.
Yes, it was really, really frustrating. I remember, early on, it looked kind of scary what was happening in Asia and China. Italy. And I thought to myself, gosh, this doesn't look good. And, I remember going to a Subway shop. It was actually Sheetz, I think. And there were a lot of folks in there who clearly weren't eating well. And I remember turning to Kim and I said, I'm so concerned about these folks and what's coming for them. And then that study came out, about the numbers of people who had pre-existing conditions who were experiencing the worst outcomes. And I thought, okay, so at least though the government's going to have to tell people finally, they're going to have to, this information is going to have to be shared because, this is life and death. And I just can't believe that we went through the entire pandemic and, people in positions of power who understand the connection of food to, say, type 2 diabetes didn't talk about this. And in our film, we don't get into the issues of masking and hand washing and shutdowns and vaccinations. We don't touch any of that stuff because, we just wanted to focus on food, and we're not taking a position pro or con. We're just not really speaking to those issues. So I'm not being critical in that sense. I'm just saying that they omitted the most important thing of all. And even key personalities in the media who in the past had publicly stated their understanding of the connection of nutrition to chronic disease to immunity didn't say anything. And so all of that was just so frustrating.
Do you think it was intentional? I don't understand humans. Okay. We have a lot of information now, and even we're not going to talk about the film in detail, but I'm going to bring up something related to it. But it's just how humans process information and then act or don't act upon what they know.
Yeah, I think sometimes there is ignorance at play, but sadly, oftentimes it's a willful outcome. People know what they should say, but they oftentimes don't, because they're conforming to the expectations of their institutions, and they're motivated to further their own reputations, their own.
I'm going to interject here.
Yeah.
What was the quote that one of the participants said that ignorance was a comfortable place to be?
Well, yeah. So yeah. Well, we did have what you're talking about is why is it that some people, when they learn this information, don't make change in their lives? And so one of the participants said, well, denial is a comfortable place to be. Mm-hmm. But what I'm talking about now is the people in positions of power. And I think a lot of times we sort of talk about, we complain about the system, the government, the industry, and we forget that there are people and human beings who make these decisions. And I think we need to start holding people accountable. We can't hide behind these institutional faces. People have to start doing what's right, not what's comfortable.
On the subject of COVID-19, the pandemic, we're also seeing higher rates of the flu, in addition to all the chronic diseases that people are experiencing. But can you just talk about why maybe having the cold or the flu is important to our health?
Oh, yes. It's part of nature. It's part of what's natural to us. And this is going to sound weird to some of your listeners, perhaps, but it's kind of like when you think about it, it's a form of nutrition. You're consuming, you have to consume food, you consume sunlight, you consume air, you also consume viruses. They're all over the place. And it's your exposure to viruses that keep your immune system strong. Now, obviously, if you're a vulnerable person and you're at high risk, I'm not suggesting that you run out and try to catch the COVID virus. So don't misunderstand what I'm saying. But I think that, we need to be healthy and do what's necessary to be healthy, and then not be afraid to expose ourselves to viruses. We have, we all know people who've locked themselves into their houses because of the pandemic. Some people still haven't come out.
Yeah.
And the danger of that is that, putting yourself in a bubble, your immune system's not getting exercise. It's wasting away. And so, it's important. It's important to live life and be healthy and expose yourself to whatever's out there.
I like to think of it as exercise. It's a form of exercise, like our body responds to viruses and builds muscle to deal with them. It's just my own kind of imagery. And I know that our response to any kind of illness too is important, not just what our bodies are doing, but what we're doing. So I know that when I start to feel under the weather, that's the time to take a step back and minimize my activities and rest so my body can do what it needs to do. And so many of us don't have the time for that or the ability and just kind of push through. And then I think the impact is even worse.
Yeah, and natural immunity, and my dad talks about this a lot. It's another source of great misinformation during the pandemic. Natural immunity is by far the strongest form of immunity. When you get sick, your whole body's infected. All of your cells are engaged and everything's engaged in your body to fight the virus. It's a whole body response. And so that's always the strongest form of immunity. And that's why it's good to expose yourself and go ahead and get sick and let your body deal with it. And then, but the key is to eat great, healthy food, like what Kim's become so proficient at.
So I'm going to back up a little bit, because Nelson and I raised 3 kids, and we raised them plant-based, and I taught in elementary school. So we were always exposed to viruses. They were in and out of our house. And I don't ever remember being afraid of getting a virus. It certainly wasn't pleasant, but I don't remember.
And if you eat well, you are still going to get sick. I'm always suspicious when people say, "Oh, I never get sick." Maybe you don't get as sick as badly, and maybe instead of getting a full-blown flu, it's more like a cold or something. But you're still going to get sick.
And I know that. I've been a vegan for 35 years and vegetarian for longer, and I got advanced ovarian cancer. And I know it was because of the environment, and I know my diet saved my life. I also had medical care, but I was strong, and I was able to go through the procedures and get well. So that's the price of being a human being and living on this crazy planet.
That's right.
Yeah.
I believe in this diet. Now, you seem like a very happy couple. I don't know what your daily life is like, but you seem to be philosophically on the same page, at least when it comes to plant foods. And that's important in a couple, because there are so many different obstacles to eating well, and society is not in our favor. They're wanting us to do all the wrong things. And it's so important for a couple to be in sync, because we're supposed to be taking responsibility for our lives. This film that you've created, it's about freedom, but we have to take responsibility to get that freedom. And part of it is having the support of the people around you.
Yeah, we're pretty fortunate to have each other, because that's one of the things that gets addressed in the film, is that so many people, they learn this and they feel the power of the plants, but then they go home and it's really difficult if they don't have the family support. So you talk about that nicely in the film.
Yes, so we do. We talk about, you brought it up just now, Karen, that the key to freedom is that decision to take responsibility for one's life. And it's true in every aspect of our life. When we make that decision that we're going to take responsibility, we gain control over our life, and that gives us freedom. And so that's an important point. But it's also true that in order to make that decision, that we need support, we need education, we need incentives, and some people don't have that. And we do make that point in the film. So it's important, when we talk about this idea of responsibility, that we don't do that in a judgmental way, and that we always have empathy for people who face greater obstacles in making those right decisions. And so that's why ultimately, we do have to take a societal approach to promoting this message.
I like to say that if I could cook for everyone on the planet, I would. And a lot of people tell me, you've probably heard it too, if you could only cook for me, I could eat this way. And people really struggle with being able to do what's good for themselves. And I see with what you're doing with your PlantPure activities and companies that you're trying to make it easier for people. And part of that is creating recipes so people can prepare the food at home. So let's jump to one of the tools that you have out there, and that's Kim's newest cookbook, PlantPure Comfort Food. Some people would say, wait a minute, that's like an oxymoron, isn't it?
You know, going back to even the first film that Nelson did, I knew I was teaching at the time and I left my job to kind of partner up with Nelson. But I knew that I wanted to teach people how to do this and be a resource for them, because it's really the how do you do it? And like you say, if I could cook for the world, I would. I had the time and the resources. But creating cookbooks allows me to sort of cook for people and give them, you know, the tools to be successful. PlantPure Comfort Food happened during the pandemic. We did live cook-alongs every week to kind of help people, you know, cook with me and learn the basics. And I think it helped a lot of people. And then we created all these recipes. We used these recipes during the film. These were some of the recipes we fed people. Comfort food, because that's what's familiar to people and that's what they really enjoyed. And they did enjoy the food. It was pretty amazing. So then shortly after the film, I called our publishing company and said, I think I have another cookbook. So that's where PlantPure Comfort Food comes from. Lots of recipes from a lot of different cultures, traditional, you know, things like falafels and Spanish paella and Asian dumplings, and just some real traditional recipes that we all know and love.
I don't know what people's definition is of comfort food, and I'm sure all of us have our own individual choices of something we reach out for to bring us comfort. But in this sad standard American diet society, most people will reach out for foods that have lots of oil, sugar, and salt. So how do you make a comforting meal that doesn't have the ingredients we want to put in our bodies?
Right. So our cookbook I don't use any oil when I'm cooking. I rely on things like nuts and seeds and avocados and, you know, higher fat plant-based foods if I need something a little bit with a little bit of oil. I don't use a lot of sugar and salt, but I do use it to flavor food because I think it's very, very important to make food that tastes good to people. So I think one of my mottos is that find your substitutions, because the way I build recipes is I go to traditional mainstream recipes and I substitute things out. And most of the time I get something that's very surprisingly delicious. So I think knowing what your meat substitutes are, you know, your soy curls and your lentils and your nuts and your seeds and beans, and I'm probably going to forget something, mushrooms, and all those things that are really good protein meat replacements. Then knowing what your dairy replacements are. I make plant-based yogurt. We make a cheese sauce, you know, kind of going in that department. You don't need to buy the processed cheeses and meats out there because they're loaded with oils and they're expensive. So I tell people, make your own. And then, you know, things like eggs and using flax meal and tofu and using the great substitutions. So I have a section in the cookbook where I talk about substitutions. And I do that, I think, in every single cookbook, because I think that's a really good tool to teach people how to go plant-based. And I've worked with a lot of people who are traditional mainstream eaters. And that's their first question. How do I replace the cheese and the meat?
It's not that difficult. Mm-hmm. You have to want to.
Mm-hmm.
And the information is there. So just to talk about a few recipes, I was just talking to my brother the other day. He's a vegan, as I am, long-term vegans. And he was mentioning that he was eating granola. And I was asking him, are you buying it? What's in it? You know, because we can be vegan, but we may not be healthy vegans, right? I know that Dr. T. Colin Campbell was one of the original people talking about how a vegan diet does not mean it's a healthy diet. Mm-hmm. And that's where whole food plant-based came from, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So anyway, you have a granola recipe that I think I might try and make for my brother.
Granola is typically very high in oil. They use a lot of oil to make it crunchy and crispy.
Right.
I use bananas. I use dried fruit, a lot of spices. It's actually called, I think the title of it is Customize Your Own Granola. You can make it any way you want. You're really throwing that wet ingredient onto the dry ingredient and teaching people what dry ingredients can you put in the granola. But the granola it's to me, it tastes just as good as what you buy on the shelf, and it's a whole lot cheaper. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
It's funny because I remember the first granola I ever made at home was from a recipe from Diet for a Small Planet back in the 70s, which recently had its 50th year anniversary edition that came out. And I don't make that recipe anymore. I don't want to slam that book or those recipes, but it had things in it that I don't eat anymore. But it was a good start. We are big on pancakes and waffles in our house, and I'm always coming up with new flour mixes. I like to play with gluten-free flours. I don't like what's available in the market. We like everything that we eat to be organic, and it's kind of hard to buy a gluten-free flour that's organic, and they have starches in them that I don't particularly care for anyway. So I've settled into some good ones. But I see that you add quinoa a lot to some of your recipes. And I always struggled with that because you can't take dry quinoa and just blend it up because you have to rinse it, right, and cook it. It was good to... Oh, you... Yeah, tell me what you do. Because I saw that you had recommended adding cooked quinoa to some of the recipes.
Yeah, so that's how I make my waffle recipe. I take pre-rinsed quinoa, because you can buy that at Costco. Most grocery stores have pre-rinsed quinoa, which is great. And then I put it in the blender and blend it up, make a quinoa flour with a little bit of oats and sweet potatoes. And that's our waffle. It's really quite healthy. So most of the recipes in this cookbook are gluten-free. I kind of went down that path because so many people are asking for gluten-free and they have sensitivities. So I wanted to honor that as well. There's not all of them. There's a few here and there, but for the most part, they're gluten-free.
Yeah, I just want to linger a bit on this gluten issue for a moment. It says so much about our society today. Why are people experiencing so many gut issues? And wheat used to sustain civilizations. And we have changed, I think, two things. We have changed our guts in a bad way because we're not eating a variety of healthy foods. And we have also changed the plant. And with glyphosate and other ways that we've manipulated wheat, it's not what was originally meant for us to consume. It's sad.
Yeah, a lot of people don't realize, but you're right. The modern wheat plant is different than what came from nature. My dad makes an interesting point in a lot of his talks that when we do eat healthy, though, whole food plant-based diet with a wide variety within it, a lot of food allergies that people suffer, diminish or go away. So it's kind of interesting that the worse we eat, the more prone we are to various allergic responses to things, and that's even true with hay fever and all. And I suffered a lot of hay fever growing up as a kid. Now again, the plant-based diet's not a magic solution for everything. So you're still getting, if you have hay fever, you still are probably going to sneeze in the spring or the fall. But I did notice for myself that when I ate well, when I started to eat really clean, whole food, plant-based diet, that my allergies were much improved.
We also live on a filthy planet.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I live in New York City, and when the seasons change, especially fall and winter, I feel it. I have to use a neti pot from time to time just because there's just stuff in my face that I feel like I have to clean out.
The other thing about our modern world today is we don't get enough sunshine. There's a real paranoia, not just about viruses now, but also about sunshine. A lot of people are afraid to be in the sun. Of course, you shouldn't get sunburn. You shouldn't overdo it. But being outside and getting sunshine, and my dad talks about this a lot as well, it's so critical for your immune system.
His mom and dad are so interesting. Every day, if there's sun, it's not always sun in upstate New York, but every day, no matter what the temperature, they go out there for 10 or 15 minutes and sit in the sun, which is, you do that too. Yeah, I don't do it enough, but
they take lots of walks. But, being outside and being, in the natural world it's important.
Yeah. So just point out some of the recipes that are in this book. Do you have any particular favorites or do you love them all?
It depends on my mood. I love them all, actually. I wouldn't put my name on a recipe if I didn't think it was fantastic. And at times Nelson has said, this is a great recipe. And I said, no, I'm not putting my name on it. So these recipes are recipes that I love and I prepare often. If I could pick a favorite, I love the Spanish paella. I just did a show on the Asian dumplings, the lasagna stew. But the other thing with this book that I think is superior to the other books is the desserts are wonderful.
That's so important.
We have a chocolate sweet potato pie that is very decadent, but it's made with sweet potatoes and dates, and it's very good. We have lemon bars, which I happen to like. I know they're not your favorite, but I love lemon bars. Grasshopper bars. But really, when I eat food, it's a mood thing, right?
Sure.
If I'm feeling a certain way, sometimes if I'm feeling a little down or I need a lift, pizza is what I go to. It just really depends on what my mood is.
Yeah, and I'll say, Karen, so I have the unpleasant task. I won't say unpleasant. I have the task. I'm being sarcastic. I have the task of taste testing her recipes. And I can vouch for the fact that this is the best of the three books. They're all very strong. But, Kim is just such a foodie, and she's so obsessed with learning new ideas. It's all she does. And so, over the course of time, she just keeps getting better and better at this. And these recipes are just to die for. They're so
to live for.
To live for, yes.
I also think on my side, not your side of the family, I come from a lot of families that have not embraced this. They've kind of tried it a little bit, but they've not fully embraced it. So I'm always trying to come up with things that I know that my sisters will love, or that my mother might enjoy. And none of them are plant-based. They think plant-based is a cuisine. They don't think it's a lifestyle.
Yeah.
I haven't quite got that through to them, but I actually think it's to my benefit because I'm always trying to build those recipes that they'll enjoy.
Yeah, you want to please them and bring them over because you care about them and it's what's best for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's sometimes it's a strange thing where those of us who are in this movement trying to make change, we can positively impact so many strangers, and yet some of the people that are close to us, we just can't get to them.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's true.
I'm curious, when you do these immersions, what recipes are the ones that people respond to most? Like the ones they go, oh my God, this is just amazing. Or is it all of them?
That's interesting because when we made these meals for them, I had people say that were doing the immersions, they've never eaten this much food and they loved it. I used recipes from all three books, mainly this book, but I have to say they loved the mashed potatoes, and we made a veggie loaf, which there's one in the cookbook. We made the sweet potato pie, and they didn't think they could eat that because they were diabetic, but doctor, yes, you can eat that.
They like the palak paneer too.
The palak paneer, which is an Indian dish. They loved scrambled tofu. Fernando made breakfast for them every morning. They loved that.
They pretty much liked just about everything. I mean, there was a meal here or there that maybe one of them or two of them didn't like as much as the others, but
that was the goal, though, was to provide them with a lot of variety so that they could pick those few that they really liked and repeat, because most of us don't eat, out of a whole cookbook for a whole month. We tend to eat those same recipes over and over. So, but they love the recipes.
Yeah, they love the food overall. Yeah.
For me, comfort food are root vegetables. I love potatoes and I love sweet potatoes. And like your sweet potato pie, we're learning just how wonderful the sweet potato is. And there are so many different colors and textures, and some are really, really super sweet and some not so much. And I'm really grateful that we live in this global community where we can experience a greater variety. There are advantages to being able to experience things from around the world in a good way. And that's one of them, sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
And are they sweet potatoes or are they yams? Doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, we love potatoes, all kinds of potatoes.
I would say we eat potatoes almost every day.
We're big potato fans.
It's definitely on my top 5 of favorite foods. Now, I have just a question here, and I don't want to mention any names, but you mentioned in the forward that there are too many people in the plant-based community that have taken extreme positions, not well-founded in science, that make it harder to develop and deliver good tasting food to those who are used to a mainstream way of eating. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
So there's a big push they call it SOS free. And they've also, taken a lot of other things out, but salt, oil, sugar, no caffeine, no alcohol, no, I don't know. The list goes on and on. No gluten. When we have that many parameters around being plant-based, it makes it so difficult for those people walking into it because, well, first of all, if you take all the salt and the sugar out of the food, it's not going to taste very good. So you've got to season food with something. So that's my first thing. But making it so difficult that I know my own sisters have said, I couldn't cook this way. There's just too many parameters. Everything has to be organic and has to be non-GMO. And those are great things, but it doesn't have to be all the time. You do your best. You can finish that.
Well, the other thing is there's a lot of confusing information out there. So, for example, I'll just mention a couple. The idea that we have to eliminate plant foods that have fats. So this would be your nuts and your seeds and your tofus and your avocados and your coconut. My dad this past year did a deep dive into the research on all of this. And, these foods contain nutrients that are actually essential to our health. Nuts and seeds, for example, they have certain nutrients that other plant foods don't have. And if you don't consume that whole category of plant foods, you're actually doing yourself harm. And, where we get into problems is when we overconsume those foods. So, a bag of shelled nuts is not the way nature presents those things. So you don't sit down and eat handfuls and handfuls of bagged nuts. And so people need to understand that. But you need to have these foods in your diet. And people who say otherwise, they don't understand the science. And the issue with salt and sugar, obviously you don't want to overdo those ingredients as well. But and my dad did a deep dive into this too, there's no science to suggest that, a little bit of salt in your diet to season your food in the context of a whole food plant-based diet and the tsunami of all of the goodness that comes from that, a few crystals of salt and sugar, that they really don't have any kind of biological consequence. There are obviously outliers. There are some people maybe who have a real hypersensitivity to any kind of sodium, so that's different. There are also people who suffer food addictions, and that's different, where those ingredients can be triggers for those folks. So we're talking about, the general, mass market consumer and making these comments.
But the idea that if you have had heart disease or you're at risk for heart disease, that you should not consume any plants that have fats in them. Your father has said many times that those, walnuts and those nuts and seeds are heart healthy.
Yeah, modest amount are heart healthy. And then there's issues around saturated fat as well. My dad just wrote a whole paper on this that he's working on now, that people actually don't understand that saturated fat is the less reactive form of fat. The real dangerous oils are the unsaturated oils, the unsaturated vegetable oils, because they go into the body and they do a lot of damage. The saturated fat that's in a coconut is actually it's better because it's saturated, because it's not reactive when it goes into your body, and particularly if it's in the context of a whole food, the coconut or even coconut milk. It's actually better than the unsaturated fats. So just a lot of confusing information out there, and it's really pretty simple. Just eat a variety of whole plant-based foods, a lot of different colors from all parts of the plant, and go ahead and use a little seasoning to make it tasty, and that's fine. And that's it.
There's a lot of people majoring in minor details.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that. Majoring in minor details. And also, people that are claiming that they're experts or knowledgeable about nutrition based on what they read on the internet. And sometimes they even vilify people that have made statements and come up with important information about fat and oil and salt and sugar, but they've misinterpreted it or taken it beyond what was really meant. And we're not all the same. And as you said, some people have issues with something specific, so they need to completely eliminate it being a problem with salt or being addicted to sweet foods.
Yeah.
So we have a lot of this. And unfortunately, the government could play a really big role here by just making some really important broad statements, how it's important to eat more plants and far less animals and far less processed foods. That's all we need them to do. We don't need the government to say everybody should be vegan, even though I would like them to do that. But they could easily move the bar in a better direction, and then we could focus on the details. I want to kind of tie together the film and the cookbook. So we learn in the film that people struggle with diet, and even those people that have been given the knowledge and are shown what to do and how to do it on their own, it's difficult. And it's hard to stick with it because there are so many different parameters. And there are more tools that are needed. And cookbooks are certainly one of them, and cookbooks that they know about, that they know there are recipes in them that they could make. And we need more than that. And I know that your PlantPure communities, the pods and the products that you're creating are all there to kind of help support. Perhaps you can embellish a little bit more on what it is that you're doing with your books and your film and everything with the PlantPure concept.
Well, we are kind of taking a more holistic approach to this, using media to help educate and inspire people. And we have this pod network that's growing and, provides support to people. And many pods are engaging in their local communities to help spread the message. And then we have this food piece with, food products and Kim's cookbooks. And we're going to be doing a lot of media in the future around Kim and her culinary instruction. So we are tackling this in a holistic way. Our biggest challenge, Karen, has been actually funding. How do we sustain all of this? And that has been a real challenge for us. These two organizations on the food side, we're getting closer to a break-even point, but not quite there yet. It's always hard to sustain a nonprofit, because you're not selling a product or something. And so that's been extremely difficult, and then you kind of get caught in a trap where you don't have enough money and bandwidth to go out and raise the money. And so we've been stuck in that wheel too. So we're trying to do a lot, but quite frankly, it has been a struggle too, to sustain all of this. So we'll see what happens, but we're doing our best.
I know you have many plant pod communities, and it's really important to have these social networks at a local level where people can learn together and have support. But I do know that people don't have a lot of time for that. And some people would like to make an income from doing some of that too. So I'm sure that's challenging all around in terms of the volunteers and the people that are at the grassroots level doing the work that's so important.
Yeah, money makes the world go around, which is why it oftentimes spins in the wrong direction.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. Okay, so let's just wrap this up on a sweet note. I know that whenever I post on Facebook and Instagram, the things that get the most likes are the desserts. And you said in this cookbook, you've concentrated on more of those. Let's talk about the Boston cream pie, because that has so much history, right?
Story. That's our love story. That's our love story. Yeah. So when I first met Nelson back in high school, I was taking culinary classes in high school because that's what I thought I wanted to do. Of course, my father said, no, you're not going to culinary school. You're going to go to a 4-year college, which I did. But I took everything I could get my hands on, and I learned how to make all kinds of cool things. When I met you, I was making a Boston cream pie that day, and I brought it to chemistry class, and he loved it. So I was like, I got something here. So I kept making more, and Nelson and I started dating, and he would bring the Boston cream pie home, and his mother knew I was up to something. But I still make it for him for Father's Day, for birthdays, and that's the one most requested dessert that he and my son both love that dessert. So,
but the original Boston cream pie that you
Oh.
bought to class, was that
it
a
had
classic version?
It wasn't as healthy as today's version.
No.
We'll just say that.
white flour, eggs, oil, sugar, all that stuff.
We were just kind of starting to make the transition in our late teens. So
Yeah, this was when we were 16 at the time, but we didn't really start transitioning until we were in our college years.
Yeah.
So I knew that for this book, I had to make a plant-based, relatively healthy Boston cream pie, but it does use sugar. So I apologize for that. But
Well, I think we're on a continual journey and always learning new things, especially when it comes to recipes. The creations are infinite, and we're always learning what we can do to make it even healthier, but even more delicious. Because I think that's the way to go with plant foods. It's all there for us to eat, the most nutritious and the most delicious. All right. Well, Nelson and Kim, I really appreciated you taking the time today to talk with me and share the very important work that you're doing.
thank you for having us.
yeah, thanks for having us, Karen.
So in addition to PlantPure Comfort Food, the book, when can we expect to see the film? That's in March?
Yeah, we're going to do an online release with Food Revolution Network in March. And then after that, as I said, we're going to see if we can get it onto one of the streaming platforms like Netflix or Amazon. And we may do a few more online screenings as well. So this probably won't be the only one that we do online, but eventually it's going to hopefully end up on one of those streaming platforms. And I think it will.
Okay, so the assignment is to pick up PlantPure Comfort Food, start making some of the recipes, share them with your friends and family, and then when the film comes out, maybe you could have some kind of fun night where you make some of these recipes and watch the movie, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you again for joining me.
Okay, thanks, Karen.
Thank
And
you.
take care. And
All
say
right.
hello to Karen and Colin.
We will. Thank you.
All right.
Bye. Have a great
Bye-bye.
day.
Bye.
That was Kim N. Nelson Campbell of the PlantPure Communities, PlantPure Inc., PlantPure Documentaries, and PlantPure Cookbooks. As you know, what has motivated me behind this podcast and all the work I do around food at our nonprofit Responsible Eating and Living is motivated by not wanting to kill animals. If you've been listening to this podcast, you know that's the number one issue for me. But being vegan for 35 years and vegetarian for longer, I have evolved, just as many of us have evolved. And my mission, although founded on not wanting to create pain and suffering, it incorporates so much more. I mentioned earlier in the program, I had my experience with advanced ovarian cancer, and it makes sense to me to promote not only something that doesn't cause immediate pain and suffering, or pain and suffering for an animal that's grown to feed people over the duration of their lifetime, but pain and suffering in terms of chronic disease for humans, pain and suffering for planet Earth because of environmental destruction that's human-induced. And it's obvious that a whole food plant diet is the way to do that. It checks all the boxes. And if you're involved in this community, you know that when we get into the details, as Kim and Nelson mentioned earlier, different experts will focus on different things. And in the PlantPure Comfort Cookbook, you get oil-free recipes. And Kim likes to add a little salt and sugar so that the mainstream, the people that have been used to eating the standard American diet, can easily enjoy these foods. And we've had numerous other people on this program promoting one thing or the other, as they mention SOS free. I want to highlight that eliminating salt, sugar, and oil in some ways is really fine-tuning our diet. And for some people, a small amount of salt and sugar is not going to do any harm at all. Personally, I know that adding salt to my diet, I feel it. I feel bloated. I get darker shadows under my eyes. It can really be an individual thing, and it really depends on our lifestyle. And I also believe that those who are in a very severe, serious health crisis will heal the fastest when they are consuming a diet where every calorie counts, every calorie you take in brings benefit, rather than offering nothing, emptiness, or offering something that might react negatively in the body. So it really depends on where you are and what you want to get out of the food you eat. And I can understand that it's confusing, absolutely confusing, when it comes to the details. I remember having Marion Nestle on the program not too long ago celebrating her memoir. She presents very broad strokes, and those broad strokes are so important that we should be promoting plant foods, minimally processed plant foods. And if we could move everyone over, move the population over to a healthier diet where the foundation is plant foods, and the foundation is minimally processed whole foods, where we grab an apple instead of a bag of chips. And we're used to that, and we enjoy it. And the government can play a significant role in this, but they don't. And you know why. But if we could, then we can start to talk about the variations, the theme and variations. I always like to use that expression from music and art, theme and variation. I just wish it wasn't so controversial. And I wish that there was a little more camaraderie within groups and organizations. Boy, we would really go a lot further if everyone worked together rather than against each other. But we have a lot to celebrate. We have people like Kim and Nelson Campbell who are doing wonderful things and creating great recipes and films to educate us and help move humanity over a little bit. I've seen some comments recently about people not liking the use of processed because basically when we harvest any food, from that step on, we're processing it one way or another. And the question is, how far do we have to go to consider a food really, really processed? And I'm going to reference Marion Nestle again because she considers something ultra-processed as something that you cannot make in your own home, that you need industrial ingredients, or even a factory to create some of the products that we see in stores. And I think that's a pretty good definition. Certainly when we peel the skin off of something, that's a form of processing. When we heat something, that's a form of processing. When we put something in a food processor, it has the word process in it, that's a form of processing. But these are all pretty mild, and they don't have as big an impact on the nutritional value, the quality of the food, as ultra-processing does. So maybe we have to add adjectives: minimally processed, marginally processed, very processed, ultra-processed, in order to get a better idea of the food. But the simplest way, in my opinion, is to buy foods, if you're not growing your own foods, is to buy them in the simplest form that you can find them, and then prepare them in your own kitchen, because then you know what's in the food. There's been some conversation about protein bars and these bars in general, if they're healthy or not. New York Times had an article recently called, "Are protein bars actually good for you? Or are they just glorified candy bars?" And Cliff Bar, I think they're getting nervous because we're starting to pay attention to the ingredients on the labels, and Cliff Bar always came across as something healthier. than a candy bar. They sponsored a workshop, and the article was published in the Oxford Academic, Making Healthy, Sustainable Diets Accessible and Achievable, a New Framework for Assessing the Nutrition, Environmental, and Equity Impacts of Packaged Foods. And while the article in the New York Times wasn't so bad, it was okay because they talked about how we shouldn't be focusing entirely on protein, and many of the bars may not be so good for us because they have a lot of added sugar. They couldn't help but include a little needling for the vegan. There was a paragraph that started, protein bars might make sense for someone who needs to increase their protein intake, for example, a vegan who doesn't get enough protein from their diet, or someone who just had an intense workout. Mr. DiMarino said, right, Mr. DiMarino needs to learn a few things, and the New York Times should know better than to put something like that slamming vegans. Because not only do vegans not have a problem getting protein, we know that all plant foods contain complete protein. Vegans in general get more varied nutrition, get more of the necessary vitamins and minerals, and the few things we don't get, like B12, can easily be supplemented. And at the end of the article, Marion Nessel is saying opt for the ingredients you recognize. If they're largely nuts and fruits, that's not bad. And on top of that, Dr. Nessel suggests eating a handful of nuts. But Mr. DiMarino, who is slamming vegans, recommends tuna or hard-boiled eggs, which are high in protein but not processed. Mr. DiMarino, you need to do a little more research, because those hard-boiled eggs, although they may not be considered processed, those chickens who produce those eggs have been processed. They have been processed in many ways, consuming feed that is processed, and the drugs and the nutrients they're given, and the inbreeding that's been done in order for them to create a certain kind of egg. That's all processing, and it's all industrial, and it's not good. And let's not even talk about tuna. Thanks to the filthy planet we live on, most of the living creatures in the ocean are filled with all kinds of toxic materials. I think the point is that these bars aren't the best thing that you can put in your body, right? Fruits, raw nuts and seeds. If you even need a snack, because snacking is not the ideal way to eat. We should be eating 2 or 3 meals a day that are satisfying. We leave a big enough break in between the meals so that we can digest and detox and then eat again. But so many people are eating on the run, and they want to get something healthy, and for some reason packing nuts and seeds or fruit seems too complicated, right? Some companies like Cliff realize we're reading the labels, or more people are reading the labels, and that's a good thing. I'll link those articles I'm referring to in this podcast post. Hey, thanks everybody for listening. I'm Karen Hartglass. This has been another episode of It's All About Food. We featured Kim and Nelson Campbell and Kim's latest cookbook, PlantPure Comfort Food. Thanks for joining me. If you have any comments or questions, you can find me at info@realmeals.org. And please visit our website at responsibleeatingandliving.com. Have a delicious week, everybody.